Hello guys, so in this video I'll be giving you guys the backend development roadmap so that you can follow this if you want to learn backend development to make it easy for you guys to actually get started learning backend development. So without wasting any time, let's get right into it. So what you're gonna need when you want to do backend development, you're gonna need a programming language. So the first thing you need to actually start learning is a programming language, but you need to choose which programming language you wanna work with because there are a bunch of programming languages. There are some that are easier to learn and there are some that are not as beginner friendly as the others. You need to actually do your own research to actually find out which one will be easier to learn. So just try a few, but what I recommend you guys to do is to actually do your own research to find out which programming language is mostly used in the country that you're located at, to make sure that whenever you want to get a job, it'll be easier to get a job in your country when you have that programming language. But before you actually start learning a programming language, what I recommend you guys to do is to learn what HTTP is. Another thing that I recommend you guys to actually learn and get a deeper understanding of what it is API. So make sure you know what API is, so know the theories of those things, so know what HTTP is, know what an API is. Then once you got that done, then you can start actually choosing a programming language. I'll just mention a few programming languages that you can choose from that I recommend you guys to learn, and I'm actually mentioning this because these are popular programming languages and there are a lot of companies that are using this, so you never go wrong when you want to actually get a job with these programming languages. So the first one that I recommend you guys to learn is Python. So Python is basically beginner friendly and is basically English, so it'll make it easy for you guys to actually get started with a programming language. So Python is the number one on the list. Then another programming language that I recommend you guys to learn is JavaScript, and the reason behind this is because if you know JavaScript, you can do both the front end and the back end. So you can use one programming language, then you can do both the back end and the front end. You don't need to learn another programming language to actually do both of these fields. So if you know Python, you can only be able to do the backend stuff essentially, but when you want to do the front end, you have to learn another programming language, which is JavaScript, right? Then another programming language that I recommend you guys to learn is C#. Then the fourth one is PHP. Then the last one is Java. So you can just learn those programming languages, learn them all, then see which ones make sense to you or which ones are mostly used in your country, so you can be able to actually get a job in your country. So yeah, you can just choose from those, or you can learn another programming language that I haven't mentioned here because like I said, there are a bunch of programming languages that are available. You can do your own research to find out which other ones are available. Then you can do your research and see if it's used a lot by many companies in your country. Then if that's the case, then you can learn that programming language. But these are the ones that I recommend you guys to learn to get started with. Then the next thing that you're gonna need to learn is a framework, right? So a framework is basically like a bunch of code that has been already written for you to make your process of coding an API easier, right? So without a framework, you'll have to write a whole lot of code, but I recommend you to actually create an API without a framework first, so that when you actually get into a framework, a lot of things will make sense. So I'm gonna mention the frameworks that you need to learn, or that I recommend you guys to learn for the programming languages that I've mentioned in this video. So for Python, you're gonna need to learn Django or Flask. So you can do your research to find out which one of those two are mostly used by most companies in your country. Then you can learn that framework so that you can get a job easier, right? But if you're learning coding just to actually start a business, you can learn whatever is simple, then you can create your business, right? But if you want to get a job at the end, you need to do your research to find out what most companies are using so that you can learn those technologies to get a job easier, right? Then for JavaScript, you're gonna need to learn Express, which is used by a lot of companies, or you can learn Nest.js. There are a bunch of other frameworks for JavaScript. So for C#, I recommend you to learn ASP.NET Core, which is used by a lot of companies as well because it's been around for years. Then for PHP, you can learn Laravel. Then for Java, you can learn Spring. So those are the popular frameworks that are used. So you'll actually find a lot of documentation for that, and you actually find a lot of problems that people have experienced. So when you face a problem, you make it easy to find solutions. So that's why I'm mentioning the popular ones that are also used by many companies. Then once you know a backend framework, then you can move on to learn a database. There are a lot of databases that are out there. There are NoSQL databases and there are SQL databases. So the difference between an SQL and a NoSQL database is that an SQL database is tabular-like. It has a structure, it has some columns and the rows. So that's the structure of an SQL database. But with a NoSQL database, it doesn't really have a structure, so you can do anything that you want with it. So it's flexible, so you can structure it if you want. So there are a bunch of databases that are out there, but I'm just going to mention the ones that are usually used by a lot of companies and they are popular, right? So the first one that I'm going to mention is PostgreSQL. So a lot of companies are using that, so you can choose to use that. It's an SQL database. So any database that has the word SQL in it is an SQL database basically. So PostgreSQL is actually an SQL database. And also you can learn MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database. It's very flexible, you can do anything that you want with it. Then you can also choose MySQL database, which is also used by a lot of companies. Then there's another one called Redis, which is a NoSQL database. Then the last one that I'm going to mention is SQLite. That as well is an SQL database. So you can choose between those databases that I've mentioned, play around with each of them and see which one makes sense to you. Then after learning all these things and you actually have an understanding and you want to just create some projects and actually deploy those projects like an API, you actually need some services that you need to learn to actually get your API in the cloud so that you can actually utilize it in the front end, right? I'll just mention a few platforms that you can use to deploy your APIs. So the first one that I'm going to mention that is usually used by a lot of companies, so that is AWS. So this is Amazon Web Services. So a lot of companies are usually using this to actually deploy the API and do a lot of things. It has a lot of services in there to actually help you with your backend stuff. So if you learn AWS, that will make it easy to actually deploy your API and use some other services to make your life easy as a backend developer. Another one that I'm going to mention is Microsoft Azure. So for AWS, I'm actually going to mention like a few services that you can learn, which is Elastic Beanstalk, which is what I use usually when I want to deploy my APIs when I'm doing the side projects, right? And there's another one called S3. It's something like Google Cloud, but you can utilize the API to actually store your files on AWS, right? So you can learn AWS, you can learn Microsoft Azure. Then if you just want to deploy like a simple API and you don't really want to know how to configure things, you can just learn Heroku. So it makes it easy to actually deploy your API to the cloud so you can utilize it in your front end whenever you want to make things easier, right? Then you can also learn Google Cloud. You can also learn DigitalOcean, how to deploy your API on DigitalOcean. So yeah, that's all you need to actually get started with backend development. So that's the whole roadmap. Of course, there are a lot of things that you actually come across that you might be interested in learning, but these are just the basics or what you actually need to actually become a backend developer. So you can use this roadmap to make it easy to actually learn the things that you need to actually become a backend developer. But there are other things that you can learn and there are other things that companies might be looking for in a backend developer. But if you have this, these are just the basics to actually make you a backend developer, right? So yeah, that's the whole roadmap, guys. If you want to become like a front-end developer, I've made a video on that. You can just click on this video. So that's gonna do it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that bell icon so you get notified whenever I release new content. And lastly, like this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have an awesome day. Bye.